The dare itself wasn't even supposed to reach Victoria Fleming. But when Sarah spun that empty wine bottle and it pointed directly at her, the entire room erupted in chaos like a pack of wolves spotting prey. Victoria had known this game night at her best friend's apartment would involve alcohol and questionable decisions, but she hadn't expected to be the target. She was the responsible one, the elementary school teacher who graded papers on Friday nights and meal prepped on Sundays. She wasn't the type to kiss strangers in bars or do anything remotely wild. Absolutely not, Victoria said, crossing her arms over her chest. Her brown hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and her green eyes flashed with determination. Pick something else. Those aren't the rules, Marcus announced, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. He was Sarah's boyfriend, and he'd been the one pushing for truth or dare in the first place. You picked dare, Vic. You have to do it. I'll take a truth instead, Victoria bargained, but the group was already shaking their heads. Sarah leaned forward, her blonde hair catching the lamplight. Come on, when was the last time you did something spontaneous? You're 26 years old and you act like you're 50. One kiss with a stranger. That's it. We'll even go with you to make sure it's safe. Victoria glanced around the circle of friends. There were 8 of them total, all people she'd known since college. They were looking at her with varying degrees of amusement and encouragement. The truth was, they had a point. Her last relationship had ended 2 years ago when her boyfriend admitted he found her boring. Those words still stung, even now. Fine, Victoria said, the word coming out before she could stop it. But I choose the place, and you all come with me. 20 minutes later, they were walking into the Meridian, an upscale bar in downtown Chicago that Victoria had passed 100 times but never entered. The interior was all dark wood and brass fixtures, with soft jazz playing in the background. It was the kind of place where drinks cost $20 and everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. This place is fancy, Sarah whispered, linking her arm through Victoria's. Are you sure about this? Victoria wasn't sure about anything, but she was already here. Her heart hammered in her chest as she scanned the bar. There were plenty of men, all of them well-dressed and presumably successful. She just needed to pick one, kiss him quickly, and get this over with. Then she saw him. He was sitting alone at the far end of the bar, and he didn't look like he belonged there any more than Victoria felt she did. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and his tie was loosened around his neck. He had strong features, a sharp jawline, and even from across the room, Victoria could tell he was attractive. What caught her attention most, though, was the way he was staring into his glass of whiskey like it held the answers to the universe. That one, Victoria said, pointing subtly in his direction. Marcus whistled low. Aim high, why don't you? That guy looks like he could buy this entire bar. Which means he probably won't make a big deal out of a random kiss, Victoria reasoned, though her palms were sweating. Just stay here. I'll be right back. She walked toward him before she could change her mind, her heels clicking on the polished floor. With each step, she felt more ridiculous. What was she doing? This wasn't her. But her friends were watching, and more than that, she was tired of being predictable. When she reached him, she cleared her throat. Excuse me. He looked up, and Victoria felt her breath catch. His eyes were a striking shade of blue-gray, intense and piercing. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Can I help you? His voice was deep, with a slight edge of weariness. Victoria's prepared speech evaporated from her mind. This is going to sound insane, but I'm here with my friends and we're playing truth or dare, and I was dared to kiss a stranger. You're the stranger. I chose you. The words tumbled out in a rush, and she immediately wanted to sink into the floor for a moment. He just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth lifted. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "Truth or dare," he repeated, his voice holding a note of amusement. "How old are you?" 21, 26, Victoria said defensively. "And I know this is ridiculous, but I don't back down from challenges. So, would you mind if I kissed you, just quickly? Then I'll leave you alone." He set down his glass, turning on his bar stool to face her fully. "You're serious?" "Unfortunately, yes." He studied her for another long moment, and Victoria felt herself being evaluated. She wondered what he saw, a nervous woman in jeans and a simple blue blouse, clearly out of her depth in this sophisticated bar. "All right," he said finally. "But if we're doing this, we're doing it properly." Before Victoria could ask what he meant, he stood up, and she realized he was tall, well over 6 feet. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and whiskey. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing along her cheekbone, and Victoria's heart nearly stopped. "Ready?" he asked, and there was something in his eyes that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. She nodded, not trusting her voice. When his lips met hers, it wasn't the quick peck Victoria had envisioned. It was slow, deliberate, and devastatingly thorough. His mouth moved against hers with a confidence that made her knees weak, and without thinking, she found herself kissing him back. Her hands came up to grip his arms, feeling solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt. The bar around them faded away until there was nothing but this moment, this kiss, this stranger who kissed like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he finally pulled back, Victoria was breathing hard. She stared up at him, completely disoriented. That was. She started but couldn't finish the sentence. "Proper," he finished, his voice rougher than before. His eyes had darkened, and he was looking at her like he wanted to kiss her again. "I should go," Victoria managed, taking a step back. Her lips still tingled, and she could feel her friend's eyes burning into her back. "Wait," he said, catching her hand. "I don't even know your name." "Victoria," she said automatically. "Xander," he replied. "Xander Zimmerman." The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Victoria's brain wasn't working properly. "Thank you for, going along with that." "Victoria," he said again, and she loved the way her name sounded in his voice. "Can I have your number?" She hesitated. This wasn't part of the dare. This was something else entirely, something that felt dangerous and thrilling. "I don't usually do this," she said. "Neither do I," Xander replied, "but I'd like to see you again." Victoria found herself reciting her number, which he immediately typed into his phone. He called her right there, so she'd have his number too. "I'll text you," he said, and it sounded like a promise. Victoria nodded and somehow made her way back to her friends on shaky legs. They immediately surrounded her, all talking at once, but she barely heard them. She glanced back at the bar and found Xander still watching her, that almost smile on his face. The ride home was a blur of her friends demanding details and Victoria trying to downplay what had happened. But that night, lying in her bed, she kept touching her lips, remembering the kiss. Her phone buzzed just after midnight. It was a text from Xander. "Still thinking about you." Victoria stared at the message for a full minute before typing back, "Me too." His response came quickly. "Dinner tomorrow night." She should say no. She should be sensible. Instead, she typed, "Yes." The next day at school, Victoria could barely focus. Her students, a class of energetic second graders, seemed to sense her distraction and were more rambunctious than usual. During lunch, she confided in her colleague and friend, Jennifer. "I kissed a stranger last night," Victoria said, still hardly believing it herself. Jennifer nearly choked on her sandwich. "You what?" Victoria explained the whole story, watching Jennifer's eyes grow wider with each detail. "And now you're going to dinner with him?" Jennifer asked. "Vic, you don't even know this guy." "I know," Victoria admitted. "But Jen, when he kissed me, it was like, I don't know how to explain it, like something clicked into place. That's called physical attraction, Jennifer said, but she was smiling. Okay, but we're doing this smart. You're going to Google him, you're telling me where you're going, and you're texting me updates throughout the night. Victoria agreed, and that afternoon, she finally looked up Xander Zimmerman. What she found made her stomach drop. Xander Zimmerman wasn't just successful. He was the CEO of Zimmerman Global, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the United States. The articles described him as a business prodigy who'd taken over his family's company at 28 and transformed it into a multinational corporation. He was 32 now, according to the most recent article, and worth somewhere in the range of $800 million. Victoria sat back in her chair, stunned. She'd kissed a near billionaire. She was going to dinner with a near billionaire. It felt surreal. Her phone buzzed with a text from Xander. "Picking you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." She typed back. "Should I be worried about what comfortable means?" His response. "Trust me." That word, trust. She barely knew him, but something in her wanted to. At 6:30, Victoria was standing in front of her closet in a panic. What did comfortable mean? After cycling through half her wardrobe, she settled on a casual dress in deep green that brought out her eyes, paired with a leather jacket and ankle boots. She left her hair down and kept her makeup natural. At exactly 7, her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Xander standing there in dark jeans and a black sweater, looking somehow even better than he had the night before. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "Hi," he replied, his eyes scanning her from head to toe in a way that made her skin warm. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." "You look nice, too." He led her to his car, a sleek black Mercedes, and opened the door for her. As he drove through the city, Victoria tried to ignore her nerves. "So," she said, "I should probably confess that I Googled you today." Xander glanced at her, his expression unreadable. And I discovered you're kind of a big deal." He was quiet for a moment. "Does that bother you?" "I don't know yet," Victoria said honestly. "It's a little intimidating." "I'm just a person, Victoria," he said. "Last night at that bar, I was having the worst day. My board had just spent 4 hours questioning every decision I've made in the past year. I was sitting there wondering why I even bother. Then you walked up and asked to kiss me because of a dare, and it was the most genuine thing that had happened to me in months." His honesty surprised her. "Is that why you said yes?" "I said yes because you looked terrified, but you were doing it anyway. I admired that." He pulled into a parking lot, and Victoria realized they were at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. "I hope you like Italian." "I love it," Victoria said. The restaurant was cozy and warm, with checkered tablecloths and candles on every table. They were seated in a corner booth, and Xander ordered a bottle of wine without looking at the menu. "So, Victoria," Xander said once they were alone, "tell me about you. You're a teacher." "Elementary school," she confirmed. "2nd grade, it's chaotic and exhausting, and I love it." "What made you want to teach?" Victoria thought about it. "I had this teacher when I was 7, Mrs. Patterson. I was really shy, barely spoke in class. She never pushed me, but she created these opportunities for me to shine. By the end of the year, I was participating in class plays. She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I wanted to do that for other kids." Xander was watching her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "That's incredible." "What about you?" Victoria asked. "Did you always want to run a massive corporation?" He laughed, but it sounded bitter. "No, I wanted to be an architect, actually. I loved designing buildings, creating spaces, but my father had other plans. Zimmerman Global has been in my family for 3 generations. When my father got sick, I was 28 and working at an architecture firm in New York. He called me home, and I've been running the company ever since." "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked. Every day, Xander admitted. But it's my responsibility. My father built that company from almost nothing. I can't let it fail. Their food arrived and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Victoria found herself laughing more than she had in months. Xander was funny, quick-witted, and surprisingly easy to talk to. He asked about her students, her friends, her favorite books and movies. He seemed genuinely interested in every answer. Okay, confession time, Victoria said over dessert. That dare last night, I was this close to backing out. I'm not spontaneous. I'm the person who plans everything down to the minute. And yet you walked up to a complete stranger and asked to kiss him, Xander pointed out. Temporary insanity, Victoria said, but she was smiling. I'm glad you're insane, Xander said, reaching across the table to take her hand. His thumb traced patterns on her palm, and Victoria felt that same electric connection from the night before. After dinner, Xander drove her home but parked instead of dropping her off at the curb. I had a really good time tonight, Victoria said. So did I, Xander replied. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I want to be honest with you, Victoria. My life is complicated. I work constantly. I have obligations and expectations that don't leave much room for anything else, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since last night. I'd like to see where this goes if you're willing. Victoria's heart was racing. I'd like that too. But Xander, I need you to understand something. I'm not interested in your money or your status. If we do this, I need it to be real. It is real, Xander said, and then he was kissing her again, even more intensely than the night before. Victoria melted into him, her hands sliding into his hair. The kiss went on until they were both breathless. I should let you go, Xander said reluctantly, pulling back. Yeah, Victoria agreed, though she made no move to leave the car. He kissed her once more, soft and sweet, before finally letting her go. Text me when you get inside. Victoria floated up to her apartment and, as promised, she texted him. His response was immediate. Already miss you, tomorrow. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria saw Xander almost every day. Their schedules were complicated, with her teaching and his endless business obligations, but they made it work. He'd pick her up after school and they'd grab coffee or walk through the park. On the weekend, he took her to a Cubs game, and she discovered he was surprisingly passionate about baseball. Every moment with him felt both exciting and comfortable. He made her laugh, challenged her thinking, and kissed her until she forgot her own name. But he was also incredibly respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. One evening, about 3 weeks after they'd met, Xander picked her up looking exhausted. Bad day? Victoria asked as she got in the car. The worst, he admitted. We're trying to acquire a factory in Wisconsin and nothing is going smoothly. I've been in meetings since 6 this morning. Do you want to cancel tonight? Victoria offered, though the thought disappointed her. No, Xander said firmly. You're the best part of my day. Instead of going out, they picked up Chinese takeout and went to Victoria's apartment. It was small but cozy, decorated with plants and bookshelves. Xander looked around with interest while Victoria got plates. I like it, he said. It feels like you. They ate on her couch, and Victoria could see the tension slowly leaving Xander's shoulders. After they finished, he stretched out with his head in her lap, and Victoria ran her fingers through his hair. Tell me about the worst thing a 7-year-old has ever said to you, Xander said. Victoria laughed. Last week, one of my students looked at me very seriously and said, Miss Fleming, my mom says you're pretty, but you should do something about your hair. Xander burst out laughing, the first genuine laugh she'd heard from him all evening. What did you say? I asked what she suggested, and she said I should get it cut like Elsa from Frozen. Very specific advice. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. At some point, Xander sat up and pulled Victoria onto his lap, kissing her slowly. The kiss deepened, becoming more heated, and Victoria felt herself getting lost in him. His hands slid under her shirt, warm against her skin, and she gasped into his mouth. "Victoria," he murmured against her lips, "tell me to stop if you want me to." "Don't stop," she whispered back. But even as things intensified, Xander maintained control, keeping them just on the edge of going further. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Not yet," he said, pressing his forehead against hers. "When we do this, I want it to be perfect. I want you to be sure." Victoria's heart felt too big for her chest. "You're pretty amazing, you know that. I'm just trying to do this right," Xander said. "You're important to me." He left shortly after, and Victoria went to bed with her heart full and her mind racing. She was falling for him. Hard. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it felt right. The next day, Sarah called her during lunch. "Okay, I need details," Sarah demanded. "You've been seeing this guy for 3 weeks and I've barely heard anything." "Who is he?" Victoria took a deep breath. "His name is Xander Zimmerman." There was a pause. "Wait, the Xander Zimmerman, the CEO?" "Yes." "Holy shit, Vic. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want it to be about that," Victoria admitted. "I wanted to just enjoy being with him without thinking about all the other stuff." "And how is it?" Victoria smiled. "It's incredible. He's incredible. I think I'm in love with him." "After 3 weeks," Sarah sounded skeptical. "I know how it sounds," Victoria said. "But Sarah, when I'm with him, everything just feels right." That weekend, Xander invited Victoria to his place for the first time. She'd been curious about where he lived, and when the car pulled up to a stunning high-rise in downtown Chicago, she wasn't surprised. What did surprise her was the apartment itself. It was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, but it was also surprisingly stark. The furniture was modern and expensive, but there was almost nothing personal. No photos, no artwork, no indication that anyone actually lived there. "I know it's cold," Xander said, watching her reaction. "I'm never here. This is basically just where I sleep." "Don't you have any family photos or anything?" Victoria asked. Xander's expression shuddered. "My father died 4 years ago. My mother lives in Arizona now. We're not close." Victoria heard the pain beneath his words. "I'm sorry." "It's fine," Xander said, but it clearly wasn't. He moved to the kitchen, which looked barely used. "I thought I'd cook for you tonight, or attempt to anyway." "You cook?" Victoria asked, surprised. "I used to, before the business consumed my life. Figured it was time to try again." They worked together in the kitchen, and Victoria discovered that Xander was actually a decent cook. He made pasta from scratch, and they laughed when it turned out slightly lumpy. They ate at his dining table, which looked like it had never been used, and talked about their families. Victoria told him about her parents, who lived in the suburbs and called her every Sunday. She told him about her younger brother, who was in medical school and drove her crazy but whom she adored. Xander listened intently, and when she was done, he was quiet for a moment. "That sounds nice," he said finally. "My family was never like that. My father was all about business. Everything was about the company, about maintaining the Zimmerman legacy. Love was never really part of the equation." Victoria reached across the table to take his hand. "I'm sorry. Every child deserves to feel loved." Xander looked at their joined hands. "Being with you, Victoria, it's the first time I've felt like I could have something real, something that's mine, not the company's." "You can," Victoria said softly. "I'm right here." He stood up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. They moved to the couch, and this time when things heated up, neither of them pulled back. Victoria's hands explored the muscles of his back while his lips traveled down her neck. When he lifted her into his arms and carried her to his bedroom, she didn't protest. That night was everything Victoria had imagined and more. Xander was attentive and passionate, taking his time to learn every inch of her body. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Victoria felt completely at peace. "Stay," Xander whispered into her hair. "I'm not going anywhere," Victoria promised. The next morning, Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Xander propped up on one elbow, watching her. "Morning," she said, suddenly self-conscious. "Morning," he replied, leaning down to kiss her. "I could get used to this." "Me too," Victoria admitted. They spent the day together, lazy and content. Xander showed her his building's rooftop garden, which had an incredible view of the city. They had brunch at a cafe nearby, and Victoria felt herself falling even deeper. But that afternoon, reality intruded. Xander's phone rang and his expression darkened as he listened. "I have to go into the office," he said after hanging up. "There's an emergency with one of our suppliers." "On a Sunday?" Victoria asked. "The job never stops," Xander said, frustration clear in his voice. "I'm sorry." "I'll make it up to you." Victoria assured him it was fine, but as he dropped her off at her apartment, she felt the first whisper of doubt. Could they really make this work when his job demanded so much? Over the next month, that doubt grew. Xander was constantly being called away for meetings, business trips, emergencies. There were dinners cut short, dates canceled at the last minute, and nights when Victoria didn't hear from him at all because he was working until dawn. She tried to be understanding. She knew his job was important and demanding, but it was hard not to feel like she was competing with Zimmerman Global for his attention. Things came to a head on Victoria's birthday. Xander had promised to take her to dinner at her favorite restaurant, but at 6 o'clock, he called. "Victoria, I'm so sorry," he said, and she could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "There's a crisis with our factory in Ohio. I have to fly out there tonight." "Tonight," Victoria repeated, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "Xander, it's my birthday. I know, and I'm sorry." "I'll make it up to you, I promise. We'll do something special when I get back." "When will that be?" Victoria asked. "A few days, maybe a week." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Okay, Victoria, it's fine," she said, cutting him off even though it wasn't fine at all. "Have a safe flight." She hung up before he could say anything else. Sarah came over within the hour, armed with wine and ice cream. "He's an idiot," Sarah declared. "Missing your birthday, unacceptable." "He didn't miss it on purpose," Victoria said, but her heart wasn't in the defense. "His job is just so demanding." "That's not an excuse," Sarah said firmly. "Vic, you deserve someone who makes you a priority." Victoria knew Sarah was right, but the thought of ending things with Xander made her chest ache. Despite everything, she loved him. She just wasn't sure if love was enough. Xander was gone for 5 days, and during that time, they barely spoke. He sent texts apologizing, explaining how busy he was, but Victoria felt the distance growing between them. When he finally returned to Chicago, he showed up at her apartment at 10 o'clock at night, looking haggard. "I'm sorry," were the first words out of his mouth. "I'm so sorry about your birthday, about everything." Victoria wanted to stay angry, but seeing him like this, clearly exhausted and miserable, her resolve crumbled. "Come inside," she said. They sat on her couch and Xander took her hands. "The last few weeks have been hell," he said. "We're trying to expand into international markets and everything is going wrong. I'm barely sleeping, barely eating. But none of that is an excuse for how I've treated you. You deserve better." "I just need to know that I matter," Victoria said quietly. "I know your job is important, but I need to feel like I'm important too." "You are," Xander said urgently. "Victoria, you're the most important thing in my life, but I don't know how to balance it all. The company needs me." My employees need me, and I need you. Maybe you need to figure out what's most important, Victoria said, and even as she said it, she feared his answer. Xander looked at her for a long moment. I don't want to lose you. Then don't, Victoria said simply. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I'll do better, I promise. And for a while he did. Xander started leaving work earlier, delegating more to his team. He made sure to set aside time for them, and Victoria felt hopeful again. They went to museums, tried new restaurants, spent weekends at his place or hers, just enjoying being together. 2 months after her birthday disaster, Xander invited Victoria to a charity gala his company was sponsoring. It would be their first public appearance as a couple, and Victoria was nervous. What if I don't fit in? She asked Sarah while trying on dresses. These people are going to be wealthy and sophisticated, and I'm an elementary school teacher. You're an elementary school teacher who's dating a billionaire, Sarah corrected. You fit in just fine. Besides, if Xander loves you, that's all that matters. The word love hung in the air. Xander hadn't said it yet, and neither had Victoria, though she felt it every time she looked at him. She settled on a simple black dress that Sarah insisted made her look elegant and sophisticated. On the night of the gala, Xander picked her up looking devastating in a tuxedo. You're stunning, he said, his eyes sweeping over her. You're not so bad yourself, Victoria replied, smoothing down his lapel. The gala was being held at a luxury hotel, and when they walked in, Victoria was overwhelmed. The ballroom was enormous, decorated with flowers and twinkling lights. Everyone was dressed in designer clothing, and Victoria recognized several faces from magazines and television. Xander kept his hand on the small of her back as he introduced her to person after person. Business associates, board members, investors. Everyone was polite, but Victoria could see the curiosity in their eyes. They were wondering who she was and why Xander had brought her. You're doing great, Xander whispered in her ear during a lull. I feel like I'm being evaluated, Victoria admitted. You are, Xander said bluntly. Everyone wants to know about my personal life, but ignore them. You're here with me, and that's all that matters. During dinner, Victoria found herself seated next to an older woman named Margaret, who turned out to be on Zimmerman Global's board of directors. So, Victoria, Margaret said, how did you and Xander meet? Victoria hesitated, then decided on honesty. I was dared to kiss a stranger at a bar, and he was the stranger. Margaret's eyebrows shot up, and then she laughed. Well, that's certainly unique. And what do you do? I'm a teacher, Victoria said. How lovely, Margaret said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. That must be so rewarding. The conversation moved on, but Victoria felt the weight of judgment. These people didn't think she belonged here. They didn't think she belonged with Xander. After dinner, there was dancing. Xander pulled Victoria onto the floor, and she went into his arms gratefully. Having fun? He asked. Not really, Victoria admitted. I don't think your board likes me very much. My board doesn't get a vote, Xander said firmly. I don't care what they think. But as the evening wore on, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that she was in over her head. This was Xander's world, full of wealth and power and expectations she could never meet. In the car on the way home, she was quiet. Talk to me, Xander said. You ever think we're too different? Victoria asked. You have this whole life, this world I don't understand. Maybe I don't belong in it. Xander pulled the car over abruptly, turning to face her. Listen to me. I have spent my entire life in that world, surrounded by those people, and I have never felt more alone. Then I met you, and suddenly everything made sense. You make me feel real, Victoria, like I'm more than just my last name or my bank account. But no buts, Xander interrupted. I love you. I'm in love with you, and I don't care if you're a teacher or a CEO or anything else. I just care that you're you, Victoria's breath caught. You love me. I've loved you since that first kiss, Xander said. I just didn't know how to say it. Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. I love you too. Xander kissed her then, deep and passionate, right there on the side of the road. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was laughing through her tears. Take me home, she said. They drove to Xander's apartment, and that night they made love with a new intensity, a new understanding. Afterward, lying in his arms, Victoria felt like everything had changed. Over the next few months, they settled into a rhythm. Victoria became more comfortable in Xander's world, attending events and meeting his colleagues. She even won over Margaret, who admitted that Victoria was good for Xander. For his part, Xander made more of an effort to separate work from their personal life. He came to Victoria's school's spring concert, where her second graders performed off-key songs. He had dinner with her parents, enduring her father's interrogation about his intentions. He even helped her brother study for a medical exam, patiently explaining complex business concepts that somehow related to the healthcare system. Victoria's friends adored him, especially after he funded a new library for the elementary school where she taught. I didn't do it for them, he told Victoria. I did it because I see how much you care about those kids, and I wanted to support that. They had their challenges. Xander still worked too much sometimes, and Victoria still felt out of place at fancy events. But they talked through every problem, refusing to let misunderstandings fester. On their 6-month anniversary, Xander took Victoria back to the Meridian, the bar where they'd first kissed. I've been thinking, Xander said as they sat at the same bar where he'd been sitting that night. That dare was the best thing that ever happened to me. To me too, Victoria agreed. I want more nights like that, Xander continued. More spontaneity, more adventure. I've spent so long being responsible, being what everyone else needed me to be. With you, I get to just be me. You can always be yourself with me, Victoria promised. I know, Xander said. That's why I'm doing this. He slid off his bar stool and got down on one knee. Victoria's hands flew to her mouth as he pulled out a small velvet box. Victoria Fleming, Xander said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. 6 months ago, you walked up to me and changed my life. You made me remember what it feels like to laugh, to relax, to love. I don't want to spend another day without you. Will you marry me? Victoria was crying, nodding before he even finished the question. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. The ring was beautiful, a simple diamond solitaire that caught the light perfectly. Xander slipped it on her finger, and then he was standing, pulling her into his arms and kissing her while the entire bar erupted in applause. I love you, Victoria said against his lips. I love you too, Xander replied. Thank you for being brave enough to kiss a stranger. Planning a wedding while both working demanding jobs turned out to be challenging. Victoria wanted something simple and intimate, while Xander's position meant certain expectations. They compromised, settling on a medium-sized wedding with close friends and family, plus some of Xander's essential business contacts. The engagement also brought changes. Xander asked Victoria to move into his apartment, but she'd always hated how cold it was. Instead, they spent weekends looking at houses, trying to find something that felt like home. They found it in a beautiful brownstone in a quiet Chicago neighborhood. It had hardwood floors, a fireplace, and a backyard where Victoria immediately envisioned a garden. It needed work, but they both loved it. This is it, Victoria said, standing in the empty living room. This is our home. Xander wrapped his arms around her from behind. Then let's make it ours. They spent months renovating, and Victoria loved seeing Xander's creativity emerge. He had opinions about crown molding and paint colors, about the kitchen layout and the master bathroom. This was the architect he'd wanted to be, finally getting to design something. They moved in 2 weeks before the wedding, surrounded by boxes and chaos but deliriously happy. The wedding itself was perfect. Victoria wore a simple lace dress and carried wildflowers. Xander cried when he saw her walking down the aisle on her father's arm. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises of love and partnership and adventure. At the reception, Sarah gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. 6 months ago, we dared Vic to kiss a stranger. We thought it would be funny, maybe a little embarrassing. We had no idea she'd find her soulmate. Xander, thank you for not stopping at one kiss. Thank you for seeing how incredible she is. And Vic, thank you for being brave enough to take a chance. Xander's best man, his college friend Nathan, told stories about how Xander had been before Victoria, always working, never smiling. Then he met this woman, Nathan said, and suddenly he was talking about love and happiness like they were real things. Victoria, you saved him, thank you. As they danced their first dance, Victoria looked up at her husband. No regrets, she asked. Not a single one, Xander replied. You. Just one, Victoria said. I wish I'd met you sooner. We have the rest of our lives, Xander pointed out. I plan to make every day count. Married life suited them. Xander continued to run Zimmerman Global, but he'd promoted several talented executives and learned to delegate more effectively. He still worked hard, but he also made time for Victoria, for their home, for the life they were building together. Victoria continued teaching, finding new joy in her work now that she had someone to share it with. Xander loved hearing her stories about her students, and he became a regular volunteer at school events. A year after their wedding, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She'd been feeling tired and nauseous, and when the test came back positive, she sat on the bathroom floor in shock. She told Xander that night over dinner. She'd bought a tiny pair of baby shoes and set them next to his plate. When he saw them, he looked confused for a moment, then his eyes widened. Victoria, he said, his voice hopeful and terrified at the same time. We're having a baby, Victoria confirmed. Xander was out of his chair in an instant, pulling her into his arms. We're having a baby, he repeated, laughing. I'm going to be a dad. Are you happy? Victoria asked, suddenly nervous. Happy. Xander pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were wet. Victoria, I never thought I'd have this. A wife I love, a home, and now a baby. I feel like the luckiest man alive. Pregnancy was hard on Victoria. She was sick constantly and exhausted all the time. Xander was incredibly patient, bringing her ginger tea in the morning and rubbing her feet at night. He read every pregnancy book he could find and drove her crazy with his overprotectiveness. I'm pregnant, not dying, Victoria told him when he tried to carry her up the stairs. I know, Xander said, but you're carrying our baby. Let me take care of you. Victoria's students were thrilled when she announced her pregnancy. They drew pictures of babies and asked a million questions. One little girl asked if the baby would come to 2nd grade, and Victoria had to explain that it would be a while. As her due date approached, Xander became increasingly anxious. He'd moved several meetings and cleared his schedule for 2 months around the baby's arrival. The nursery was ready, painted a soft yellow with white furniture and stuffed animals everywhere. Victoria went into labor on a Tuesday afternoon. Xander had been in a meeting when she called, and he'd apparently run out mid-sentence, leaving a room full of confused executives. He made it to the hospital in record time, holding Victoria's hand through every contraction. Their daughter was born just after midnight, weighing 7 pounds and with a full head of dark hair like her father. When the nurse placed her in Victoria's arms, Victoria felt her heart expand in a way she hadn't known was possible. "She's perfect," Xander whispered, staring at their daughter with wonder. "She looks like you." "She has your hair," Victoria pointed out. They named her Sophie, and she changed everything. Xander fell completely in love with his daughter, learning to change diapers and give bottles. He'd conduct business calls while walking her around the house, and more than once, Victoria found him sleeping in the nursery, Sophie on his chest. Being parents was exhausting and wonderful. There were sleepless nights and endless laundry and moments of pure panic. But there were also first smiles and baby giggles, and the incredible joy of watching their daughter grow. Victoria took maternity leave for the rest of the school year, and when she returned to work the following fall, they hired a nanny to help. It was an adjustment, balancing work and parenthood, but they figured it out together. Sophie was 2 when Victoria got pregnant again. This time, it was a boy they named William. He was calmer than Sophie had been, sleeping through the night by 3 months. Sophie adored her little brother, always wanting to help with bottles and diaper changes. Their house was chaos, filled with toys and laughter and love. Xander had cut back even more at work, determined not to miss these precious years. He coached Sophie's soccer team and taught William to throw a baseball before he could properly walk. "Remember when you told me you wanted spontaneity and adventure?" Victoria asked one night. They were lying in bed, finally alone after getting both kids to sleep. "I remember," Xander said. "Is this what you imagined?" Victoria gestured around their room, which currently had a pile of clean laundry that needed folding and several toys that had migrated from the playroom. Xander pulled her closer. "No, it's so much better. I thought adventure meant travel and excitement. Turns out the greatest adventure is building a life with someone you love." Victoria kissed him softly. "I love you. I love the life we've built." "I love you too," Xander said. "Thank you for that dare. Thank you for kissing a stranger." "Thank you for not stopping at one kiss," Victoria replied. Over the years, they settled into their life. Sophie grew into a confident, creative girl who loved art and music. William was quieter, more analytical, with a love for puzzles and books. They fought like siblings but adored each other. Xander eventually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Zimmerman Global, taking on a chairman role that allowed him more flexibility. He never returned to architecture professionally, but he designed a studio in their backyard where he worked on personal projects. Victoria taught for 15 more years before retiring to focus on literacy programs for underprivileged children. She wrote a children's book that became surprisingly popular, and she loved visiting schools to read to kids. They traveled as a family, showing Sophie and William the world. They had family game nights, and ironically, Truth or Dare became the kids' favorite. Victoria and Xander would share a knowing look every time, remembering the dare that had started it all. Sophie got married at 25 to a kind man named Daniel who made her laugh. William followed his uncle into medicine, becoming a pediatric surgeon. Both children grew into remarkable adults, and Victoria and Xander couldn't have been prouder. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Xander took Victoria back to the Meridian. It had changed over the years, updated and modernized, but it was still there. 30 years, Victoria said, sitting at the bar. "Can you believe it?" "Best 30 years of my life," Xander replied. He looked older now, his hair silver at the temples, but his blue-gray eyes still held the same intensity. "Mine too," Victoria agreed. She looked around the bar, remembering that night so long ago. "I was so nervous, I almost backed out." "I'm glad you didn't," Xander said. "That kiss changed everything." "It wasn't just the kiss," Victoria said. "It was what came after. It was you deciding to call me deciding to say yes, both of us choosing each other every day. "I'd choose you every time," Xander said, taking her hand. "In every life, in every universe, I'd choose you." Victoria felt tears in her eyes. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "I've had 30 years to practice," Xander teased. They stayed at the bar for hours, talking about their life, their children, their dreams for the future. When they finally left, Xander pulled Victoria close on the sidewalk outside. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" Victoria asked. "For taking a dare, for being brave, for loving me even when I was difficult, for building this incredible life with me." Victoria reached up to cup his face. "Thank you for being the stranger I kissed. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me. Thank you for being my partner, my best friend, my love." They kissed there on the sidewalk, just like they had 30 years ago, and it felt just as electric, just as right. That night, back in their home, Victoria thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a game, a dare, a kiss. But it had become so much more. It had become a lifetime of love, of choosing each other, of building something beautiful together. She looked at Xander sleeping beside her, his arm draped over her waist, and felt grateful for every moment. For every challenge they'd overcome, every joy they'd shared, every ordinary day that had made up their extraordinary life. Victoria had once been afraid of spontaneity, of taking chances. But kissing that stranger had been the best risk she'd ever taken. It had led her to Xander, to their children, to this life she loved so deeply. As she drifted off to sleep, Victoria smiled. Sometimes, she thought, the best things in life start with a dare. Sometimes all you need is to be brave enough to kiss a stranger. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that stranger becomes your everything. The game night that had gone so wonderfully wrong had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams, and she wouldn't change a single moment of it. Their story had started with one kiss, but it had grown into a lifetime of kisses, a lifetime of love, a lifetime of choosing each other. And that, Victoria thought as sleep claimed her, was the greatest adventure of all.